We're going to get started. This is Ethics, Data, and Transparency. I'm Beth Coleman. I run the city's platform lab in Toronto, so I'm delighted to be here again. So I'm going to have Arantxa and Maddish introduce themselves when they speak. Can you hear well enough? Okay, cool. Excellent. So we have an interesting shift in issues of data and privacy that have turned into legislative matters of late. So GDPR, which you're all familiar with in terms of privacy for consumers in the EU, and also more recently the decision in California, the CCP, which is the California Consumer Protection Act. So both of those things are good steps, and they also signal awareness, a critical awareness, not just the politicians and the policymakers, but a movement from people in terms of whether your trigger was Cambridge Analytica or other things that are making you think, who is taking my data? What are they doing with my data? There is much more of a conversation about data sovereignty and how data circulates and how we're managing data than we have had perhaps ever. So that's a very positive thing. But one of the questions that I'd like to ask us to think about is what would happen if we start with, instead of saying fear, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of Google exploitation, I'm afraid of Facebook misusing, what if we start with the idea of risk? What if we start to reimagine ourselves as agents, as participants with power, and think about in what ways can we choose to participate, and in what ways can we demonstrate some of our power by withholding our participation. In a fantasy world, what if we all leave Facebook? Guess what? I mean, so I know that's not going to happen at the moment, and it's more complicated than that. It's 2 million people, a billion, and it's also questions of first world and emerging worlds. There are places in the world where Facebook is the only way to get any networked information. So that's its own complication in terms of infrastructure and different locations. So I want to ask a question about risk as a way of thinking about agency. And both of these fine people are doing hands-on work in terms of working on designing tools that speak to an embeddedness of ethics and also a practice of transparency. So I'd like them to present on their projects, and then we actually would like, since we're a small group at the end of a very rich 3 days, I'd like to invite people to start speaking immediately, to really start saying, these are the issues, these are my examples, this is where we have progress, this is where we have a problem, because this is a conversation between us, and all of you obviously have both, you know, the base experience of being network users, but also the particular expertise of the positions that you're coming from. So I'll pass it over to Arantxa to start. You want this mic?
Okay, in that case. Hi. Well, thank you for coming, and thank you for invitation. Well, I'm going to introduce myself and my company with a little video, okay? And then I explain you what we do. It's a small video. It's just 45 seconds. No, it's okay. You can. Because it's music, it's just music, so it's okay. Yeah? Closer? Okay.
The other microphone works better, I think.
Yeah? Let me check the other one. Thank you. Hey? Yeah, this is better. Wow. Well, Well, so my name is Arantxa Lozano. I'm coming from Enreda. We are a consulting firm that we are working for a long time, for more than 10 years, with governments and municipalities and also the third sector and private sector to develop technology to make social projects and transparency projects, and also citizen participator. Okay, so we were working for more than 10 years using data, but maybe not very deep data, but also data for make all the transparency portals in municipalities and that all. So now we are working in a project that it's called Open ODS. We will try to make a platform to speed up the 2030 agenda from the UN. The 2030 agenda has a SDGs. I'm so sorry with my English. So we will try to make a platform is a multi-level platform and also multi-stakeholders platform. Could be for everybody because the agenda is for everybody. It involves from the governments to the citizens, so it's for everybody. Okay, so it's an open source tool to put all the data inside to measure what are you doing with the SDGs and how are you working with. Okay, so you can measure from the beginning, but also what are you developing and how is your work to arrive to the last. Okay, so well, if you want, I can tell you more later with more detail and well, so.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm very quickly explain what we are doing and why we are doing that. So Maddish is a project that allows people without technical skill to have advanced free and open source application running on a known server, meaning that this server may be located at your home or in your office, in a school, or with Amazon even, yes? So why did we start this project? We could detect a lack of solution that could be an alternative to the services provided by big companies such as Google, MailChimp, and so on. So people who were aware of the use that this platform were doing of their data had no really a solution. Migrate from a Gmail account with all the services related with that is quite a difficult task. This is this is quite a little bit old, yes. I'm sure that now the graph is worse. These are, I don't know if you can read it, these are the users that are using Gmail as email platform, and these are age ranges. These are the youngest and these are the oldest. So we see a tendency that people more and more are using this service. And it's quite understandable because once you set up a Gmail account, you have everything working at the click of a button. You have calendars, you have all the related services, and they work good. Google is really sexy, their interface, and apparently you don't even have to pay, apparently, right? So the solution would be maybe migrate to another provider. But if I decide tomorrow to leave Google and use another internet provider for Gmail, for email, sorry, and if this other company follow the same business model, I'm not sure that the day of tomorrow, this company maybe is bought by Google, and so I have to start again. This is a screenshot of the companies owned by Alphabet, and there are more, but they didn't fit into the screenshot. There are a lot. This is from the Wikipedia, and if you refresh every day. It is growing in an amazing ratio. So the solution would be, for example, start installing your own email server. And this is an example of tutorial to do that. And you see that it's not really a simple task. Yes, and when you finish, if you get to the end, this is the interface you have in order to create your first email account. Yeah, and this is not sexy, and we need easy solution. We need, people have other tasks to do. If we want really a social transformation, we don't have to ask to people dedicated to social transformation to learn how the high technology works. They need solutions. Yes, and if this is solution, they will end up here, and this is not what we want, of course. So this is why we created this tool. This tool allows people to just with clicks like that, check, install, to have all these services running on a known server, including the email account, including an Nextcloud, including software for newsletters, so alternative to all the main services that people are using in their daily life or daily work. So the idea is that we didn't want to be a small Google. So our model is that people are owning their data. We don't even have access to their data. This is not a service that we give and you can open an account in our service. This is completely autonomous system that you run without having to worry about the technical complexity. And it was like we have, I won't enter into technical details, but if somebody has interest, I can explain. But the idea is that then people have all this information, all the data, all the application, they have total access to their system with super admin powers, and not even us can access their system. So we have been thinking a lot about, there are a lot of other alternatives. There are a lot of others groups and organizations worried and trying to give an answer to this situation. And I think that the thing that we are doing different is that we don't want to know anything about people data. They need to be total sovereignty, because if tomorrow, for example, Google buys my company, they will still be able to use the infrastructure that they have built with this tool without needing me. And this is the idea of sovereignty we are trying to promote, and that way we also are able to make the open source and free software developer community closer to users, because there are a lot of powerful tools that are underused because of the complexity of their installation. And we need to stop this monopoly on the market and make an effort to use alternative tools without being a sacrifice. And this is our philosophy.
Great. Anantak, before we open it up, can you give a couple of concrete examples of the design process and what you're working on?
Yeah, sure. Well, as I was talking you, this is the open ODS, Open ODS in Spanish, but it's Open SDG. We try to increase to accelerate, to speed up the agenda. So we try to make the best planet in our well, it's not our idea, of course, it's an UN idea, but we try to do it with more easier for everybody to arrive to achieve all the objectives that we have to arrive at 2030. So now, well, we working with some companies, but we work with some governments, and we try to take data from the real sources. Of course, we try to take more of INE. We were talking about INE before. But we try to do it in our best way. But sometimes we find that not everybody is so transparent to give the data for us. So it's difficult to arrive to different points because you ask data for something, but it's not so transparent. So we are working with that, and we're trying to be more transparent. We help the governments to be more transparent.
Okay. So let's start with some direct questions for the speakers, if anyone has them. Any questions for the speakers that come up immediately? One of the questions I have for Maddish is, this is a beautiful system that you guys designed, but you send me an email, it comes into my Gmail folder, and now all of your information, the content of your information and all of your contact details are now part of my Gmail repository. And as far as I can tell, we're not really, even if I'm sovereign of my data, the minute I am communicating, which is what it's for, then we have a different kind of issue.
Of course, and it's not only the email I'm sending you, it's all the contact that you have in your phone that we never ask permission to people. Sorry, may I record your contact on my Gmail contact account? People just do that, you know. So of course we can't be Taliban and stop living for that. But the power we have is trying to make understand the importance of that. I am in different initiative where having a Gmail account in a mailing list is forbidden. We don't want that. So our small details that we can start using, of course, we have to be operative. Yeah. And the thing is, making understand people that change is not so difficult. For me, it's the important thing, because there are a lot of people that are not happy with that have concerns about, with all the scandals we had from Snowden to Cambridge Analytica. So the thing is that they say, yes, but it's so difficult to have an alternative so the way is a little bit working on making, showing that is not so impossible and not so difficult.
Because I think sometimes that we are running from some place, and then something or somebody say, okay, stop, you have to go there and begin again. So because it's you have to give your data for many platforms, and you give it normally, and people they are not conscient to, well, they can use it in other way. So it's like, oh, I have my Facebook, I have my Gmail, but I have my Cabify, or also my shop, my fitness, my everything, my what do you say, feed, I don't know. So you use everything, and you know that they have your data because you give some data, and then when you stop, and sometimes somebody say, okay, this is so risky, then you have to begin again and then take everything. So I think there are two ways so difficult to engage. What do you think about that?
Well, we have experience of migrating big organizations from the conventional platforms to free platforms. And of course, it's a difficult process, but it's doable. So it's not so difficult. We have it quite systematized so that you can do it without suffering too much. But there is one thing important for me. Social network are, for me, a part of all this, because if you want to reach a lot of people, if you want to communicate, if you want to enter into the mainstream, you can't, of course, close yourself into a network that is totally free, but there's nobody in there, you know? But in this case, you know, you are talking publicly about something which is different, that you are having a private conversation by email, for example, that is supposed to be private, and then somebody is reading it, processing it, and passing algorithm in order to create profile, the shadow profile that are profiles that this platform draw about people that don't even have an account on their platform. And they can do that because of what you were saying before. So, I mean, it's the important thing is having an alternative. Then everybody is free to decide what they want to do with their data. But what we have to avoid is that the only alternative is the one that big corporations give us, and we can't not afford any other kind of solution.
So that's a really helpful point in terms of having choices and having enough knowledge and nimbleness to understand strategically when are we using your platform and when are we using Google or Twitter, and understanding the kind of modes of broadcast. But can we step back and ask some questions about technology design and ethics for a moment? Because we have, it's hard to see it from where we're standing, but we have growing examples of a kind of robust design process that does not assume that we're in a passive position of consumer, that we're just feeding data for advertisement or for political clicks, which has become a huge problem unto itself. So, for example, one of the people that we talked to is Estonia, where they've had this X road for 17 years now that has a different framework of, yes, an e-identity card, but one that is working within a robustly designed, trusted system. And the question of how a civic body comes to trust their government, essentially, to design something well. One of the reasons there's trust in Estonia for the e-identity card, and it's really used across all the different silos of services, and not just public services, but also in engagement with industry as well. And it's not particularly social media, because people are on Facebook there, just like every place else in the world. But one of the reasons that it is trusted is because transparency is an ethic that's built into the system. So as individuals, the design of it has made it relatively trivial to understand, have the police looked at my data in one quarter? Is my doctor accessing my health records? And is this in relationship to something that I gave consent to? And one of the outcomes is they've seen police being fired for misuse or data abuse. Somebody gets bored, they want to know what their ex-spouse is doing, which is not a legitimate use for a police person of the data. So this kind of person will then get fired if you say, why are you looking me up? This isn't appropriate. So we have this kind of a system that, I mean, some of it is will to build it, financing that comes from the nation itself, but also a different kind of practice. Because if we talk about e-identities, there are other places in the world where it actually seems like we are lining up to be surveilled, that we're actually making it more and more easy, because we swipe our card for the metro, we have our cell phones, which already for the private companies and the telecom are tracking devices. And then the next layer of your e-identity, that every place you go, it's like the airport, you're scanned, you're scanned, you're scanned, you're scanned. And it seems like, I mean, and I want to hear what people have to say, but the only paradigm under which that becomes a benefit for society and not just extended surveillance is if we are building with an ethics in which transparency, accountability horizontally, but also, I don't know how to say it, because some of it's vertical in terms of power, government, private industry, but how can we move toward designing in relation? And much of the projects that have come out of Sharing Cities and the Barcelona City Council, Decidem, the ones that are really democratic platforms, these are strong ways, and you think about a company like Taiwan, not a company, sorry, a country where using digital platforms to facilitate participation has become quite powerful, but it's much more in the space of public discourse and a commons, and some of it doesn't touch industry. And it seems to me, since they are, I mean, your graph, maybe it's out of time, but it's still profound. This is a huge place of data repository. When we look at something like Snowden and the NSA, I mean, they get the back door with Google, and right now we're just talking about global north paradigms around privacy and ethics. We're not talking even about practices in other contexts where there just are not the same frameworks in terms of what privacy means and what consent means. And okay, so those are many things. Did you, either one of you, want to speak to this, or what are some of the concerns or some of the exciting things that you see in your own experience?
Yeah, thank you very much. I wholeheartedly welcome this debate about data privacy, and I'm also very concerned. And I just thought that all that you presented had to do with decisions. You can opt out of using Gmail when you have a useful alternative. And maybe you can opt out of WhatsApp using another application that doesn't send the data, and so on. So it's about decisions. So I would like to bring our attention to another aspect, which is the mobile itself, the device. Because as far as I know, like 80% of the smartphones in the world have Android Google system pre-installed. So most of the people are already sending their data to Google servers, which is private information, which is as private as a diary, actually. So it's a really a problem at the level of choices. Can you really decide to not have an Android phone, and what are the solutions to opt out of this Google monopoly on the data in the mobile business?
Okay, so, you're right, we are trapped, yes? So yes, there are initiatives that are working on devices, on mobile devices, and are creating operating systems, some based on Linux, some based on other operating systems. They are a mess. If you start using that, you have to really to believe a lot your fight, you know, because it's not easy. But for now, what I do is avoiding doing certain action through the mobile. Yes. So of course I won't fill my mobile phone with sensitive information. I just use it when I have not a computer, for example, and when I need to. Yes. And of course I don't use Gmail. You can keep out Gmail. I can live without the Google Play Store, and I install directly the APK application or through F-Droid. So I use the DuckDuckGo browser instead of the Google Chrome that comes by default. So you can minimize But of course, we don't really know what it's running underneath the operating system. So if there are some other, yes. But for example, I use encryption and I don't use encryption with my mobile phone. I won't ever put my private key on my mobile phone. So use it, but knowing that this is an insecure device.
So all of this labor to protect our privacy, we have to work super defensively to encrypt what we think needs to remain private, to understand when we're using our phones that they are giving off all kinds of information, location being one of the most obvious. Apparently, when you turn your Android phone off and you go around Barcelona, you turn it back on 2 hours later, it has continued to track your movement when it's off and not connected to a network. So it is a profound tracking device. So we feel the walls closing in on us. What if we shift some of the position? Because it is way too much to ask us to do all of this labor, all of this knowledge production, all of this technology production around just barricading, and it's just an avalanche. And again, we have other things we need to do. We have things to organize. So how do we think about a relationship with these companies that has to shift? If they're providing us a service, and we've started to have this conversation, what are the limits of this service? And also, how do we have more general knowledge about what is it that you're doing? How is it that it is taken up? So I think that activation in terms of city councils and countries themselves presenting some resistance, this is one mode. But I also think that we need to consider how collective action speaks to these companies. They weirdly don't want to get bad publicity, even though they're richer, like they can never spend all their money, but somehow they still are averse to bad publicity, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Google. The example from where I am of Sidewalk Labs, which is an Alphabet company, so it is a smart cities company, and they showed up with the most dazzling offer. They say, we have $50 million, so for free, we're going to test in your city sidewalks where no snow will collect, smart traffic cans. Children can run and they don't have to look because no cars will ever hit them because we've got good sensors, and there are no cars anyway because this is all green. So the total utopic, techno-determinist city, which is also got perfect language and design around it's wood coming from very ecological usage, and we use the word participation, and we ask the people of the city, what do you want? What are you interested in? So it looks good, and I thought, there's no way this will ever be stopped, and it isn't stopped. But it was held up for a year, and it then becomes a matter for the city council in Toronto to turn some policy into what are we doing with privacy? What are we doing with the citizens of the city? How is their data being handled? Because a very small group of activists made a lot of noise, and it held up this rich company, and it is by no means a full triumph, but it did bring public awareness, and it did slow things down a little bit. And as we sit here in this installation, those things are worth considering because we see all the packages that are getting shipped out all over the world. And, you know, these are global companies.
Thank you. I'm Jorge Vargas, and I'm with the Wikimedia Foundation. I want to touch base on something that, and thank you so much for your presentation. Like, I'm full supporter of pretty much everything you said. One of the challenges that I see, and I would love to hear your thoughts about, is the fact that there's less than 4 billion people still offline. People are rapidly going online, but there's zero efforts when it comes to like getting those new people that are starting to use the internet for the first time, usually through a phone, to get educated around these topics, right? So on a personal level, I think that the companies should have like an ethical obligation to like find ways to make this information not just available, but easy and understandable, right? Like sometimes even for us that have certain expertise within like technology in general, this could still be complicated, right? Like, so I wonder if you all have any thoughts about that, or whether you've seen any experiences of companies or organizations that are making efforts to educate or train folks, like those that are going online, or folks that are just like not in a good digital literacy space around these topics. Thanks.
Well, I really don't know if there is any company that has that information and that education. I totally agree with you, but I don't know. Do you have someone?
On the one hand, I know that these companies are making big investments in order to be the first one to leave these spaces. For example, in school, they start from very young. So once you have learned how to use Google and no idea how to use a Thunderbird, for example, why should I make the effort? And so this is, no? And of course, they have a lot of power, economical power, human resources. So there are a lot of initiatives that are spreading, coming from open source movement, free software movement, that are spreading these tools. And but of course, if we compare the power of one to the other, the battle is hard to win. Anyway, this is why we don't have to stop, to give up. But for example, the zero rating, no, with the example you use, in zero rating places like Africa with bad connection, this is what they did. You know, so they give free connection for certain applications like Facebook and not for the others. So, I mean, they are making policy, they are lobbying for that. So, relating to what she was saying, we as society, one way would be to pretend to request from legislation that certain basic rights are granted and certain basic ethics are included. For example, if we love technology, we love progress, so we don't say, stop it because they are using our data, but citizens always should have the option to decide which data can be shared, which not, on the one hand, and to know what is really happening behind this program, behind this algorithm. And this is not happening. All this code is totally opaque, privative. And so as citizens, we don't know what's happening. And this could be, we should have the freedom to choose as adults and not be treated as small babies that somebody decides for us.
I think Wikimedia is doing a good job. I met some of your compatriots in Toronto, and the questions about inclusion and a kind of intersectional relation are real commitments. The way, and I have to recall the name of the person who was presenting on this, and I'll get it for you, but this idea of the old model of a kind of masculinist, heteronormative, libertarian framework is really toxic for other people's participation, even in this space that is literally one of the, torches for open and a more democratic idea of how a platform can behave. So that's good. My framework is a bit North America centric, and there are equivalents in different parts of the world, but the EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation, has been unresting in terms of helping to organize cases with the ACLU and other groups that are around protecting civil liberties in relationship to how technology is designed. Yeah, and in Europe. But with that said, I think we go back to your basic point that it's not it does not prevent some of this kind of land grab in terms of new clients. India, Africa, not China, because nobody can touch China.
In the future.
Oh, China has China. But this land grab in terms of who are the new clients, because there's always has to be growth, because that's the only model that can be understood. So part of the question I have for the types of endeavors that you guys are working on is, how do you make funding and a sustainable framework? Because are you functioning as an NGO? Is it tiring? Are you going to end up having to go get a job at IDEO or something?
I asked first, so you have time to think about that. So we, till now, we have paid all the development on our own, and we are trying to build a sustainable model, because we also offer hosting, not only the software that you can install and then not pay anymore, but also hosting, which give us a monthly income, but it's not enough because we develop a lot, and the benefit we have on each is really silly. So we work with a lot with people from South America, a lot of feminist groups, which are doing a big job in this sense, because they have a lot of organization doing on the field, doing training on security, on privacy, on autonomy. So I'm talking about, for example, Digital Rights Defenders, DDP is Digital Defenders Partnership, or Derechos Digitales in Chile. So there, from the feminist side, because of the thing you were mentioning, there is a strong work on that, and we work a lot with them. So we are like a provider somehow, not official, but for all these organizations. This year we also had a help from the city council here, because, for example, here we are still, not to us, but people are still using the Google Drive. So we want to stop with that, at least in our very first circle. And so, and also, but we aim not to depend on funding, but to be autonomous and to create an ethical business that can make happy people that use it and people that work for this project. This is our goal. We are close, not yet, but we are getting closer and closer every day.
Well, we work normally always in open source, so we are working with a community. I think this is one way to make more sustainability, because we work all together and we will try to receive the benefits, but from the community. So I think this is one idea. We work also with the third sector, and we do political incidents in different ways. We prepare some little platforms, little tools to be more citizen, to be more active citizen with incidents, political incidents. We work in Africa now. We are working in Somalia with the government. We are doing a platform for make the constitution, and it's so crazy, because we were talking, because everybody has phone. The only thing that they ask us is, please make something that we can use it with phone, because everybody has phone and everybody do everything with phone. It was crazy for me, because I thought, okay, in Africa, it's in Somalia. We are talking Somalia, really. So at least 90% of people in Somalia use mobile phone. I think it's more than in Spain. It was crazy. So we work with different initiatives that we try to be more common, more community, do more community, and try to be more honest, more transparent, and more ethical.
So, is there any more questions? Because our clock is running out. Okay, thank you so much for your attention and your participation. Our time is up.